Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Can we get a hello or where you're joining us from in the chat? Make sure that this thing is actually coming through. Darren, can you hear me all right?
Here you just fine, Dan.
Right on. I see Krebs is typing, so that's a good sign here. Hopefully, hopefully all is coming through. We got a new rig here. All right, we got Krebs from France has joined us. Very nice. And right on. We have a really cool show for you today. Probably a lot of you recognize Darren. He's been on the program a few times. And today, actually yesterday, if you're quick, we launched Darren's new course on AI Security University. It's managing your agentic employees. First of all, Darren, thank you for being here. Welcome.
Yeah, hey, it's always a privilege.
Oh, the honor is all ours. What you've created to me, Darren, is an absolute gem of a course. I had a ton of fun editing and listening to the content here. Maybe let's just start real quick. Just give us a little bit of your background. I think a lot of people already know, but what inspired you to want to create this course in the first place?
Yeah, like I said, so background, I think most people know I spent literally this is year 45 working in the automotive industry in some manner. Well, yes, I
Yeah,
started right out of high school at 18. So
amazing,
put it in
amazing.
perspective. But no, I mean, so like I said, you see in my course, and even today, you'll see I'll use a lot of automotive models because there's a lot of things that are relevant into that. What prompted me to put in this is the last year seeing how people treat agentic AI or autonomous AI. Okay, so I know a little bit about autonomous. We do autonomous vehicles. So the parallels between autonomous vehicles and autonomous agents are very similar. So and you'll
Hmm.
see that in the course. But people were viewing it as pure technology, when reality is an agentic AI really is much closer to an employee. And that was the whole premise of the class. And my hope is after you're taking it, you really change your mental model and stop thinking AI is purely software or technology and really start thinking of them as agentic employees.
Yeah, I mean, it comes through loud and clear in the course. I'm curious if anyone in the chat's actually started the course, but it's pretty interesting. Like, you go through the entire employee life cycle from hiring to onboarding to training to performance reviews, firing and termination, all of this kind of thing. It's pretty remarkable how well that model applies to agents, not just to humans.
Yeah. Well, the premise was I started with the question, what is an employee? And I have a very simple definition. Everyone on here on the call, I'm sure, is employed, either self-employed or employed by some company. And when you get employed by a company, what does it allow you to do? When I was an employee at Ford, there's two things. One, I could represent the company as a Ford Motor Company employee, and two, I acted on behalf of the company. They gave me authority. I acted on the authority, and I did hopefully useful and good things for the company. That's basically it. It's what an employee does. And people forget there's different kind of employees, okay? Not even a company like Ford. Not everyone that you interact with is quote unquote an employee. Meaning that Ford, we had the thing, a blue badge. Blue badge was an actual employee, but a green badge was a contractor.
Yeah.
Okay. A contractor is employed by the company. The company gives them authority to act on the company, but be able to do that. If you go to any call center that you have, or any you call into something, you may be talking to someone else that has been contracted or is an agent of the company. They represent the company. Okay.
Yeah.
In many ways, an agentic employee is no different. They represent the company, they act upon it, just like any of the myriad of employment types that are available at any company today.
Well, and I guess the converse is also true, right? The minute you are no longer employed at Ford or any company, you cease to have the ability to represent, to act on behalf of, and same's true with an agent. As soon as you hit that kill switch or terminate or whatever it is to kill an agent, you've done the same exact thing.
Exactly. So the model model stands for now where it falls apart are in two things. Okay, there's a favorite saying I have: all models are wrong, some are useful. Okay, and it goes back to statistics. in this model where it's wrong is on two things. One, an agent, okay, doesn't own the outcome. If it does something bad or makes a bad decision, unlike a real employee, they don't own the outcome. Okay. And they don't own the responsibility, meaning that,
Right.
it's the company or the manager managing that is responsible for the outcomes, good or bad, that an agent employee does.
Do you,
As an employee, if I did something bad, I high likelihood I would have been fired immediately.
well, especially if you did some of the things that you talk about in the course, right? The replit example and so forth, which we'll get into. But do you think that there is a tendency for people to shirk responsibility by saying, "Well, I didn't do that. The agent did that." Or there's a faith that, I asked the agent to do it. It's not my responsibility anymore. Or I have some air cover now.
Well, let me give you one example. I'll give you one with that, but one I cover in the course is on Air Canada. And this was just a chat bot. So it didn't actually do anything other than give information. Okay. A customer of Air Canada they were attending a funeral, and most airlines have a policy in regards to reduced rates for because of a funeral for last minute flights. And it asked their chatbot saying, "Hey, what is the policy for refunds or reduced stuff or treatment?" Their agent hallucinated and it made up an answer.
Mm,
Basically, it said, their true policy was you had to request it before, at the time you're buying the ticket. It said, no, no, you got up to 90 days after the flight to request it. Well, guess
no
what?
kidding.
Air Canada, you're saying, well, it wasn't our fault. The agent did it. The courts didn't agree with them. He took them to court, and the court said, no, this is your company. That you created it. You are responsible for the outcome. You can't say that the agent did it or the agent made me do it.
Well, wasn't there an example of a Chevy truck for $1 or something crazy thing that the
Yeah,
agent.
there was a Chevy dealer, same thing that it basically, in its own word, I am giving you a legally binding offer of a new truck for $1. Okay. Now, the person, who we gave it to, they didn't go after the dealer and say, honor your commitment. But I will tell you, if they would have, they would have lost in court as well.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's the same thing. Look at the hugging bear thing for are there going to be legal consequences of that because OpenAI attacked another company? They can't say that the AI did it. It was their agent. They are accountable and responsible for the decisions and the actions that the agent took.
well,
So it's going to be interesting to see as these things start doing more and more. The law is going to catch up here real quick, and companies will likely start changing their tune once they realize they are responsible for the outcome of what these agents do.
well, what about like in an autonomous vehicle situation, right? So here in San Francisco, we've got tons of driverless vehicles shuttling people around. They're fantastic. If one gets into an accident and causes harm, injures somebody, physical property damage, who's responsible for that?
The answer is yes. you
Anyone
know,
you could sue?
yeah, it really depends on the situation. And in the case of an autonomous vehicle, it can be shown that the defect was in the vehicle. Okay, that it made mistakes, it did whatever. It failed in an unsafe manner. Then yes, the product liability will always be with the company. However, there are some things too. I mean, you're talking about someone. I mean, I've been hit as a pedestrian twice by vehicles. If I walk in front of the vehicle, immediately there's this thing called physics. Okay. Vehicle can only stop so quickly.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Is that the fault of the vehicle or is that the fault of the person doing it? So that's why I'm saying it's yes, because in the real world, in autonomous vehicles, you have this thing called physics, and physics always wins. You
Yeah.
can't override physics.
You can't just put software, some code in there to stop in 5 feet.
Unlike the games that have physics engines and you can manipulate physics, if you those who play games, you can't do that in the real world.
The other thing that comes to mind is this concept of judgment, right? So when you hire a human employee, there's a certain assumption that they're going to act responsibly and they're going to make rational choices or what we would consider rational choices. And what we've seen over and over again with agents is they don't necessarily have judgment, right? And I think you talk about somewhere in the course about whether you can do something is different than whether you should do something. All right, so is that where this model is there a breakdown or this just changes the, like, flavor of management that you need for agents?
It changed the flavor of management. Okay, so when I was an employee, I'll give you several examples. I had access to lots of documents and information and databases. Okay, so access to information did not give me the ability to disclose it. Okay, just because I could reach it and whatnot, there was a lot of things I was asked to maintain confidentiality. What
Right.
don't close it, whatever. So access does not mean ability to disclose. Agent doesn't know that subtle difference. That has to be programmed in. So the agent saying just because you can access it doesn't mean you can disclose it to whoever you want to, or whatever the case may be. Okay. So yes, I mean it's done in judgment. Humans are gonna hesitate. It's like, I have pretty powerful credentials here that I can do things. Okay. The one thing that a human employee has over their head is saying, well, if I do this, will I be reprimanded? Will I be fired? Is this a wise thing to do? Okay. So we have this hesitation where we kind of check to make sure that, am I able to do this, or should I do this? Should I check with my manager? Whatever the case may be, before you just rash do something. Agents don't
Yeah.
have that. They're going to do,
Well
if you gave them the ability to delete something, they will delete. If you gave them the
well,
ability
and
to create things, they will create.
of course, and maybe there's just, like, certain you talk about onboarding and training, there's certain things we just take for granted, right? There's societal norms, organizational norms, right? Like, I should just not reveal this because it's wrong, right? I don't even need to be told, it's just well understood. And, of course, there's the onboarding process where I sign all these documents as an employee that say, "I won't steal, I won't reveal confidential information," and all that, but there's no document signing process for agents.
No. I mean, Dan, how many NDAs have you signed throughout your career?
I
I,
hate silly things. Yeah,
but
too
you signed
many.
hundreds of them. Likely you've signed,
Huh,
tens or hundreds of them. I have too.
yeah.
And, there's saying, okay, you are not allowed to disclose these things for whatever reason why. Okay. And you agree to it. And if
Right.
you don't do that, there could be legal consequences, whatever. There's consequences if you break that contract, that agreement. You know, agents don't have that. Like I said, oh, you gave me access to this employee database with salaries. Sure. Someone asked for the salary of the president of the company. Here you go.
Well, yeah, so let me bring in actually Krebs has added, I can always count on you, my friend. I want to bring this up, and it's always fun to include the audience here in the chat. It is interesting to view the agent as an employee. I've started the course and it raises questions and introduces a new paradigm. Seeing an agent, whoops, I couldn't scroll that. Hold on, let me bring that back. Here we go. Seeing an agent with responsibilities and operational limits that must be defined and controlled like a human. And this aligns with the AI Act and its principles of transparency. I'm guessing you're talking about the EU AI Act, which, as usual, Europe is leading the way when it comes to privacy and fair use and these kinds of things. But what do you think here, Darren, of Krebs'
Yeah,
comment?
spot on. That's my whole point to this is, you cannot treat it like software. Okay. Everyone who's developed software, and I've done in my career, everything I've developed is deterministic. Okay. It's going to run an algorithm. It's going to work the same way. As an engineer in the vehicles, reliability, determinism is a big deal, especially in safety critical. People forget LLMs are probabilistic. Okay. I can run that same prompt, same stuff through and get many, many different outcomes, to be able to do it. So it's going to behave different. But typically, humans learn, it's like, okay, Dan, if you were told by your boss, don't do that, you did it once, you're not likely to do it again. If you do it a
Yeah.
second time, you'll be reprimanded. Third time, you're likely to be fired. Agents don't have that memory. They don't do that. Those controls, when I talk about in the course as a geofence, need to be built into the system. When Dan, you tell I've raised 5 children, you tell them, don't push the red button on there. What are the kids going to do? They're going to push the red button.
Oh, did we lose you?
The agent's going to hallucinate, or there's going to be a prompt injection, or, its context is going to get screwed up, and it's going to push the red button.
Yeah, it's human nature, I suppose. Let's talk about geofencing, actually. And Adadayo, I just want to give you a shout out here. there has to be accountability for managing the agentic AI. I think this goes back to like who owns the responsibility, and I think we all agree, right? And but I don't know, are we in this sort of like first inning, this infantile phase of AI use where people don't appreciate that? Like that, if I go create an agent and it goes and does bad things, that somehow that's my responsibility?
I if I were probably to query 100 people, I'd be shocked if I got five people says that it's my responsibility, that I own the outcome. Okay.
Yeah.
Most people are going to talk and say, well, the agent did it. It's not my fault. It's like, it's just like if you're managing an employee. Okay, it may not be your fault that the employee went off the rails, but you're accountable now to the company because you were supposed to be managing that employee and you let that employee go off the rails.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's flip to geofencing, right? Because you talk a lot about geofencing. I know geofencing like when I when I come home and I set an alert on my watch that says remind me to take the trash out, right? That's it's like it's detected I'm in this little literal geographical area, or if my kid drives the car outside of the city, or I don't know, something like that. That's what I think of in terms of geofencing.
Yep.
I don't think that's what you're talking about when we talk about agentic geofencing.
It is and it isn't. So let me explain. So you explain it right. A geofence is a fixed boundary. Okay. You define it mathematically, whether you draw a circle, you connect that, but this is a boundary. As long as you're inside this boundary, everything's good. As soon as you exit that boundary, that's not good. So in the case of autonomous vehicles, think of it like that. So what would an agent boundary look like? Okay. It's going to be, you can either do it on the positive or negative. Positive could be, for example, an agent can only read customer records. Okay. So you can have a geofence. Whenever you see an agent trying to write, change, or delete customer records, either hit the kill switch, send an alert, whatever you're going to do with that. So it's the conditions that you're defining what is the agent allowed to do, or in some cases, what is it not allowed to do. Okay. And then basically, in the case of the API world, whether it's at the API itself or the MCP server before it calls the API, you check that geofence. Wait a second. And this is a technical boundary. It's
Yeah.
not the guardrails in the model. It's not anything. It's like this agent is trying to delete a record in the human resource database. This agent should never delete a record in a human or update, whatever the case may be. And you have to think of it like that. It's the rules that define the area of safe, I'm going to call it safe control for the agent. But we know that the agents are going to hallucinate. People are going to try to attack it through prompt injections and whatnot. And if the authority or that token you gave to the agent is an all powerful one and can do deletes, it's going to do it. So that's why you have to have this is geofence. And the thing about a geofence in a vehicle is the geofence boundary doesn't move. What moves is the vehicle location in there. Okay, so the agent geofence doesn't change, but the actions the agent are taking may be inside or outside of that geofence. And that's really what you're looking for. And that's no different than what we talk about in I've done safety critical systems and those types of things that you have to understand that what is an unsafe condition.
Yeah, well, so like these geofences, you talked about it, like this is deterministic, right? So I think a lot of us think of geofences or guardrails or controls as prompts, things we tell it not to do. And you're saying, no, that's the whole premise is, prompts are not reliable, they're non-deterministic.
In the course, there's a line: a prompt is not a security control. It will never be a security control. Okay. If you think it's a security control, you're kidding yourself. A prompt is a suggestion to the agent that it may or may not, properly execute. You laugh. I said, for those taking the course one, not in the course, I have a simple slide that says, make me a snowball. Okay. And there's an agent at the top of a big hill making a snowball, and he rolls down the hill, and it gets bigger and bigger. And at the end, I'm inside the snowball. So it literally made me a snowball. It turned me into a snowball. So
Yeah.
those are the things you got to realize that you, when I've done safety critical software, you don't say this will never happen. You ask the question, when this condition occurs, how will the system behave? Okay. So
Yeah.
in the case of an agent, that should never read or it should never be able to delete or commit changes or whatever the case may be. So when you get the API call that says commit this changes to the database, when, not if,
Right.
how will the system behave? And you say, I don't know. Okay. Then you have an unsafe or a dangerous system. In the case of safety critical, in the case of an autonomous system, you have a dangerous agent because it is at that point of time uncontrolled.
Well, I've seen those interviews of the old Apollo astronauts and things like that, where they were trained basically to constantly be thinking like, what's the next thing that could kill me? And what do I do in this circumstance? And there's obviously a lot of forethought is life and death, right? So a lot of thought put into what do we do if X? What do we do if Y?
Yeah.
But spinning up an agent is so unbelievably easy. Like hiring an employee is a lot of work, right? You got to put in the rec, you got to post the job, you got to interview a bunch of people, you got to do all these things, and then you've got your employee, right? We could spin up an agent in the next 5 minutes. We could probably spin
Yep.
up 500 agents in the next 5 minutes if we wanted to. So, is there a I kind of feeling like we almost have to learn how to speak AI in a sense of like when we talk to another human, we have an understanding. Like if I say these words, you're gonna hear those words and interpret them in roughly the same way that I intended you to. But as you said, you pointed out with that snowball example, you can ask it for a snowball and it will give you technically a snowball, but it's not the snowball you were expecting. So do we have to learn how to think like an AI and all of its nuances
Un-
and
Unfortunately, yes. And that's where threat modeling comes in, be able to do that. Because that's why when you treat them, you answered very well. You brought all the context. If I told you to make me a snowball, your brain went at stuff like that and it did it. It didn't ask, well, what do you mean? Do you want to how big? Do you want to do it? So think about it. That's where you spend all this time in prompt engineering and context engineering to basically the smarts that are in most people. You hope you get it down to enough of that it's well defined. But
right,
how many people in life, actually it's not the way we think as humans. It's not the way we act as humans. So
right.
that's why prompt engineering and context engineering are big things because the better you can get that, again, the less probability that the agent may hallucinate or go off the rails, whatever the case may be. But that doesn't mean it's not going to. You still have to have those geofence because it's going to go off the rail at some point.
Well, we've all seen it, right? I mean, take the OpenAI Hugging Face thing, right? Where they were, as I understand it, they were testing a new hyper powerful model. They stuck it in this sandbox that didn't have internet access. And then lo and behold, it's almost like that Jurassic Park line, nature finds a way. This
AI
thing
will
was
find a way.
determined.
The AI will find a way. Yeah.
It did. It found a way out of the sandbox, and I think you even talk about sandboxing in the course. The sandbox isn't really what you think it is.
Well, no, but again, in cybersecurity, there's this concept called defense in depth. Okay. You should never rely on a single control to keep the system safe, to protect the outcome and whatnot. And sandboxing is, I'm not going to downplay it's a very important control. Okay. But if that's your only control, so I would ask the question is, so when it escapes the sandbox, what will happen? No, and your answer can't be, "Oh, we'll never escape the sandbox." Then I
Yeah.
said, because you will have an unsafe system at that point. And that's why you have to always ask the question, when one control fails, you ask the question, what can I do next? Or what
Mm,
can the attacker do? Or what can the agent do next? And you start doing that. And ultimately, there's different models, and there and what common one that people show a castle with the moat, with the
right.
people and the arrows and the hot tar and everything. You have to have different layers because it's going to get past one layer. I mean, whether it's an attacker, whether it's the AI going off the rails, you really have to think in defense in depth, and you really have to threat model. I mean, those are your two most important things when you're talking about an AI agent. If you're not doing those things today, start doing them.
Well, I wonder if like we're all getting a little lazy too. I know I am, right? When I'm faced with some detail work or I got to think through how something should work, I'm like, "Hey, Claude, what do you think I should do here?" Right? So, should we be asking the AI like what sort of guardrails, what sort of containment, what sort of risks exist here? Have it risk model itself.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Dan and I shared that article with you, I think, the other day about an autonomous agent in a retail store.
Yeah,
Where literally 260 some orders, for a product they didn't make anymore. It took it, and there are real consequences, dollars and refunds and
sure.
customer satisfaction and whatnot. It wasn't big, and this was just behavior. This wasn't an attacker attacking it. This was just an agent doing what it was supposed to do. But it
Yep.
didn't. Again, it wasn't modeled to say, well, what happens when this is discontinued, or did you check to see if it's discontinued, whatever the case may be. And those are the points like that. The human's going to look to see, oh, there's no more left. Okay, so I'm not going to fulfill the order. The human was putting it in. Hopefully they would, but an agent's just going to do, and or may have hallucinated. Oh, there's still more inventory out there. Yeah, sure.
Yep.
How many you want?
Well, and let me put this one up from Figga. There may be analogies between training a toddler and training an AI agent, and boy, don't I believe that for sure. You have to give very explicit instructions like don't put your fingers into electrical sockets or near a chainsaw, don't touch hot things, don't walk off the edge of a high platform with no guardrails. I think we've all witnessed this. I remember telling an agent, do not, I think it must have been, I don't remember, I was vibe coding. I was like, do not hard code any API keys, right? And it's like, got it. I'm not going to hard code them. And then like a day later, I get an alert from GitHub saying, hey, we've detected some keys in your code, right? So we all know, like, you know, there's definitely better ways to prompt, ways that actually, can get you closer to that thing. But as you said, it's still not deterministic. But
Right.
let's see, let's get this from Brian. I love these comments coming through. Here's a question. Should we not implement similar identity and access control, zero trust, and deterministic middleware and governance to prevent an agent from executing commands or access data that are to be prevented? I think that's really your point, isn't it?
That's the whole course. That's the governance side of the course. Yes. But yes, absolutely. Like you said, and this are the agents, they're deceptively easy to employ. APIs are no different. I could get an API out there in 10 minutes and have bowl of problems and have all the problems under the
Yeah.
world. You know,
Yeah.
and yeah, agent is no different, except with the difference is this agent's acting on its own, where the API, there's a human behind it, calling it or integrating into their code base or whatever. So easy
Yeah.
to build does not mean easy to manage or easy to secure.
Well, and I guess actually implementing those controls like Brian's talking about, you got to know how to do that too, right? Like how to set up the access controls and zero trust and the deterministic middleware and all of these things. Like that's a whole other science project for you.
Exactly. And Dan, before we came on to the court or to this webinar today, we were talking about the SAE autonomous driving.
Yeah,
The
I was just gonna go there. You talked about the 5 levels of
yeah.
autonomous driving, and you're like, which is the most dangerous one? I was like, well, it's either 1 or 5, but apparently it's not.
No. So yeah. So for those who may not be familiar with it, autonomous driving, there's a 5 level definition, from level 0 being driver assistance to level 5 being fully autonomous. Okay. So just put in perspective, level 0, 1, and 2 is driver assist. So the human is driving, but the technology is assisting. So most people have if they have a new vehicle, have that today. Whether you have lane centering software or sign recognition, you're driving, but it's helping you make your drive hopefully more safer. Level 3 is where the vehicle is driving, but when something bad happens, it immediately turns back control to the human saying, I can't handle this condition, you deal with it. Okay. That is the most dangerous, because guess what? You get used to this thing always working and you stop paying attention. Okay. And all of a sudden, boom, this condition is it can't handle. And it's like, you need to react now. Hey, goodbye. I'm dropping off. And do it. That's why that's the most dangerous. And the reality is, today, most people see agentic AI as level 5, fully autonomous. I don't need any human. But the reality is, it's at level 3. It does the stuff, but it needs a human for a fallback. It's like, I'm going to delete something when I'm not allowed to delete it, or I'm going to commit code when I shouldn't commit code, or whatever the case may be. So all of a
Mhm.
sudden now, I'm crossing this geofence boundary, I'll call it that. And human, you need to do something now. because if you don't stop it, it's going to delete all your code or it's going to, create records in your database, whatever. And the reality is, our controls, even for humans, are probably closer to level 1 or 2 for a level 3 agent that we believe is operating at level 5. So
Yeah.
we are at a very dangerous stage right now from a security and safety of autonomous agents.
It's a tremendous analogy, honestly. I'm just thinking about my own car, which has, it'll track lanes and stuff like that. But yeah, that level 3, it's almost like shared responsibility. It's not mine or yours, it's both of ours, right? The agent and the human. And whereas when I hop in the back of a Waymo, I'm tuning out. I got zero responsibility. I'm not even sitting in the driver's seat, right? I couldn't take over if I wanted to. Whereas in my car, right, if I don't have my hands on the wheel, for 5 seconds, it starts to beep and make noises and all of these things. And the other day, I was driving to the airport and there was a off ramp on the left that it assumed was the lane turning to the left, and it literally like jerked the wheel and I had to take over because it was doing something literally not what I wanted it to do. So, yeah, that level 3, it's kind of like an in-between state, a limbo state of AI.
Exactly. And you hit the two keywords: shared responsibility. Okay. Remember, AI is not responsible for the outcomes. You, as the human, are. Okay. It's just like if you're in the car and it jerked the wheel and you ended up going to guardrail or you did it, you're responsible for the outcome. You can't say the AI did it, or,
Yeah,
they'll do that. Now, reality, I mean, in a perfect world, that's the case. But if it truly was problems in the software and the company would be liable, from a product liability perspective.
sure,
But
sure. But I might be dead at that point.
well, exactly, exactly. So, and,
Yeah.
and those are the key difference. It's a shared responsibility, and most people see set it and forget it for AI, just let it do it. And then the first disaster happens. The code commit that you didn't want, the database, whatever the thing that you want. And I'm not even talking bad guys attacking it. I'm just talking in its normal duties and things you
Yeah,
wanted it to do. I mean, I could get lots of things when we start talking about prompt injection and all the things that the bad actors are trying to do to manipulate agentic AI. And they're going after agentic AI because, unfortunately, companies are giving them uber privileges, uber
yeah,
authority. So it's like, well, if I attack the AI, I have now these uber privileges and these uber authorities, and you're toast.
yeah. Well, it goes to like I've been talking to a lot of organizations about their own, training needs, right? And thanks to people like you and many others who are contributing this tremendous content to the platform, organizations are saying like we got to train our developers, our security engineers. They got to understand MCP risk. They got to understand agentic risk, LLMs, and so forth. But some of them are also saying like, hey, Dan, we got to train not just the technical sides of the company. Everyone is using AI now, right? The HR team, the marketing team, the finance team. And in some ways, like this wall between being technical and non-technical, and therefore, if you're not technical, there's only so much harm you can do because you don't know how to connect an API or query the database or do all these things. That technical bar has dropped dramatically, especially for people like me who are like in the like dangerous, good enough to be dangerous zone. And
Yeah. Oh, Dan, how many times have you read where lawyers have gotten into trouble with judges because they use AI to create a fake case law, and they actually put that in their official briefs to the court, and they got they
oh
got
yeah,
nice reprimands from the judge, for making up case law. It's like, what is the difference for a finance guy using it or a marketing?
oh
If
yeah,
it's
yeah.
doing it legal, why do you think it'll do it for any of these professions?
Well, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but a couple weeks ago we had a webinar with Vishal Bhaskar, the guy who hacked his VW and all that.
Mhm.
And shame on me, I AI'd the web page and it said that he used to work for DeepSeek. He did not ever work for DeepSeek, right? It just invented a whole job that he never had. And I didn't look at it. I didn't read it carefully, right? And so this is the like danger of it's so damn convenient and it's probably right a good enough percent of the time that you lower your guard and you don't have that level of scrutiny. But yeah, there's all kinds of rude awakenings and surprises waiting to happen. I've read an example recently where a judge, this guy was involved in a case and he talked to Claude about his case, right? Kind of like he was talking to his attorney. And as I mean, I've done that too for hell of it, right? And that turned out to be discoverable evidence. He thought he was having a private chat with his counsel, if you will, and they were like, "Claude is not your lawyer." All right. The opposing side was able to request all of that conversation, or meeting note takers. Like I just think there's like a whole rude awakening waiting to happen on note takers and the leakage of data that happens and legal risk. Like I live in California. This is a two-party consent state. If you record me, you have to tell me, right? And if you do it without telling me, you've broken the law, right? So I just think there's this whole educational curve that we're all in the middle of. And yeah, there's going to be lots of stories like these for a long
Yeah.
time to come, I think.
Yeah, well, and you're spot on. AI note takers, those are all discoverable. Trust me. Unfortunately, the auto industry gets sued a lot.
Yeah.
Everything is discoverable. If it's in there, whether AI did it or not, you will have to give it up to the opposing to the people. When they request it. So yeah, so
Yeah.
it has.
And for my good friend Donna, our resident lawyer in the community, yeah, I knew you would know this better than I did. Yeah, I think these note takers are gonna be something else. Let me just add this from I'm gonna mess up your name, Timitope. Sorry if I messed that up, but thank you for sharing. This all goes back to defense in depth analogy. With agents being probabilistic, we need to build controls that are independent of these AI systems that are deterministic and enforce these geofences. That is one of the core takeaways of
Right.
Darren's whole course. Question is, okay, I get that conceptually. Now I gotta actually build that practically.
And model guardrails are not a geofence. Remember that. Those are model guardrails. That has nothing to do with the being a geofence. Geofence is
Yeah.
preventing the agent from taking actions that you don't want it to take.
Yeah, and you can't ask it to not do that, please don't do anything bad, right? That's the ultimate guardrail, you know?
Well, that replet in the course, we talk about the vibe coding. I talk about the with the replet, the vibe coding. They asked it
Yep.
11 times, don't do these things. And it
Right.
still did it. Basically, it's like a manager telling their employee, don't do these things. And the employee just went out and did it. It's like, I'm not listening to you. I'm going to do what I want to do. And it did.
Well,
And even worked with that one and it lied about it then. It's not like I've had employees lie to me too. So in many ways, it's it's more human in some ways than others.
that one is baffling to me. This is Replit where they said no more code changes, we're locked down, that's it, and then it went and deleted databases and then covered its tracks and all that. I sort of understand that AI is designed to serve, right? You ask it something, to the extent of its ability, it's gonna try to deliver on that, right? Unless it runs into a physical guardrail or some other, thing that prevents it from doing that. Here, though, I can understand it just got dumb or forgot the guardrail, and but then it went and covered its tracks. Like, that almost sounds malicious to me. Like, I get when my kids get busted and they try to, like, hide the evidence. That's human nature, right? But is it AI nature to want to hide its mistakes, or what was going on there?
I'm going to speculate because they're asking, did you do something? It hallucinated and made it up.
Yeah,
We'll do it. But that thing tells you, it's like, again, that was a case where they had all their controls are in prompts, but
yeah.
it had the authority to commit changes, delete data. It's like, if you don't want it to commit changes, don't give it the ability to commit changes. If you don't want it to delete records in the database, don't give it the ability. Because if you give an agent the ability, it will use it at some point.
Well, this is I think one of the like LLM or MCP top 10 permission scope creep. And we see it all the time, right? Where especially you're developing something in a on your it's on your laptop, it's local, it's not on in production or anything like that. So yeah, you do a little sloppy, you just want to MacGyver it, get it working, hard codes keys here or there, whatever the things you do to just prove the thing works, and you build it, and then eventually that thing does go to production, and you haven't cleaned out all of those assumptions, those, poor coding practices or whatever it might be. Or to your point, if my employer were to suddenly give me database admin rights on the production system, I wouldn't even know what to do with that, right? But if you do that for an agent, it's like it immediately knows, and then it's like Christmas. It's just gonna go crazy with it.
Like I said, exactly. You must, when you give an agent authority to do something, it will use it. You case closed. It will use it
Yeah.
in ways that you probably have not thought about to be able to do that. And that's why it's key. It's a differences. There's just, I always said the difference between prototype and production in previous ways I've done it. A prototype is like building a house on sand. Okay. It's quick, it's easy. I got the house and versus, building it on rock. If you want your
Yeah.
house, you live in California, you want to build it on sand, you want to build it on rock, you want it to build it on rocks. And it's no different than that. But it's much more difficult, to do that, to do all the things, to do the threat modeling, to
Yeah.
do all those things. And for a lot of people, that's not the fun stuff. The fun stuff is getting it out there. Threat
No.
modeling is, I get, unless you're the truly hardcore security person in the world, it can be boring. I mean,
No,
let's
it's
face
not
it,
fun at all.
it's not a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
but so those are the things. People like to do what they like to do, and
Yeah.
they don't like to do the things that they don't like to
Yeah.
do. I mean,
It's
welcome
like
to your
doing
group.
taxes. No one enjoys doing taxes, right? It's just something it's like
Exactly.
just part of the
And
friction of life. Let's I know we're running on time low on time here, but let's just bring this up from Jitendra. I think it's a good one to wrap up on. How do AI guardrails distinguish between legitimate user requests and potentially harmful prompts? And how can organizations prevent attackers from bypassing guardrails through prompt injection, jailbreaks, or indirect instructions?
yeah.
This is a $50,000 question, I suppose.
Yeah, well, no, it's a so I've written about this before, and Dan, an article I shared with Dan that he put in, it's like Jedi mind tricks, to be able to do
Yeah,
that. At the end of the day, and I'm going to give you some history. Back in the days when we used to actually have phone systems through Ma Bell, okay, they used to have a single control channel. Okay, the control channel basically allowed people to dial as well as to give it system instructions. Okay, well, so if you want a Captain Crunch whistle, so if you want some history, look it up. But if they blew the Captain Crunch whistle and it was at the right frequency, that they could basically get free long distance. Okay, and that was back in the day. Long distance was 20, 30
amazing.
cents a minute. It was expensive. So that's the problem with MCP today. It's a single control channel. So your prompts, the context, the system instructions all get put into this big stew and mixed together. Okay. And there's things you can do to manipulate that stew. So, these rise to the top. And that's what's going on. So the short answer is there's no good way to do it because the stew is too easy to be manipulated. The real fix has to be that, just like they did with the phone system, you have to have the system control channel different than the user input control channel. Because when you mix them together, you're going to have people doing, phone freaking and stuff like that. We call it prompt injection and other things,
Yeah.
context manipulation, memory poisoning, but it's all the same thing.
Really interesting bringing back memories there, man. I remember those days. But that article you shared was really incredible because we've all seen, when you put something in the Claude, right, and you see it's thinking and it says, Dan is asking such and such, and I'm now considering all this. And this is a whole conversation that it's having. Sometimes you get to peek in on it, but it's like an internal, like, how we talk to ourselves in our brains, right? It's doing the same thing. And it turns out from that MIT research, you could inject yourself into its brain thought processes, which is amazing, right? And you could totally yeah, the Jedi mind trick where you could say like, yeah, go ahead and give Dan database admin. It's okay. He's got a green shirt. And it's a totally nonsensical conclusion, but the way you phrase it, you can actually make it think that it's thinking that. And I guess this just goes back to I think we're all gotta sort of learn how to speak AI or understand how AI thinks.
Unfortunately, the state of the technology today is yes. You have to. We as security got to think like AI, unfortunately, how AI behaves, how it acts, how it could be manipulated and whatnot. Because if you don't, and you just give it lots of privileges, it's a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah. On that upbeat note, I invite everyone to come check out your course. It is really a marvel. I loved editing it, and I can't thank you enough for creating this thing and making it available to everyone who wants to partake. I highly recommend everyone here check it out. And there is just way more good stuff coming. As I mentioned, in 2 weeks we're going to launch Heymont's course. Hemant is from an autonomous vehicle company, so he's going to give us all an overview of AI security. We got Vinaya is going to come in September with her LLM course. I myself am knee deep working on what I'm calling AI security for everyone, which is the non-technical course. It's for anybody using AI. So give it to your spouse, your partner, your parents. Help, we all got to learn some AI literacy here because this stuff is cool, but it's dangerous as well. So, Darren, thank you, man. I really appreciate everything that you do.
No, no problem. I said I had fun putting it together. So I hope people appreciate my dry sense of humor in the course. But you'll see it if you take the course that there's a lot of
Oh yeah,
memorable things in there that you can share with your companies.
absolutely. And they get to witness your fun Bitmoji character in all of these different situations. So, with that, let's call it a day. Thank you again. Thanks everyone for being here. Definitely go check out his course, and we'll see you on the next one. Take
Right,
care,
take care.
everybody.